right, if you have your Bible, open it up to Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Ecclesiastes chapter 12. In the Pew Packers, I mentioned that, excuse me, that verse 1 is an important verse in our understanding of this last chapter, where he says, "Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, when you will say, I have no delight in them." Verse 2, "Before the sun and the light, the moon and the stars are darkened, and clouds return after the rain." Now, when he says right there in the very beginning, remember, this instruction means a lot more than just simply think about God. It means pay attention to, consider with the intention of obeying the words of the Lord. And it's you could say Solomon's version of Matthew 6. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. Seek God's purposes in your life first. And how easy is it for us to neglect the things of God when everything's going real easy? Maybe when we're real young and we're full of life, or you ever feel like you can never die, right? You feel like you can do anything when you're real young. And you have that vigor that's inside of you that you do lose as you get older. And so when you're caught up in the enjoyments and caught up in the opportunities of youth, you neglect the things of God. You don't recognize the dark days and the difficult times that will eventually come. We read about that in chapter 11, verse 8. Of course, here in verse 1 of chapter 12 as well. But these things are coming. So he wants you, the writer here, Solomon, wants us to lay a strong spiritual foundation early in life, during our youthful years, when the sky is bright, but the time's going to come when things are going to darken. And he goes from there to verses 3 through 7. And this is an interesting section. It's the most, I would say, one of the more imaginative descriptions of old age and death. If you had read through this, you probably read this part and thought it's just kind of strange. But and there are some differing interpretations out there, but almost everyone agrees on the idea that this is talking about old age and death. Look at verses 3 through 7. "In the day that the watchmen of the house tremble, and mighty men stoop, the grinding ones stand idle because they are few, and those who look through windows grow dim." Let's stop right there with verse 3 first. You may be wondering, what does this have to do with being old and dying? And you'll see it more and more as we work through these few verses. But there in verse 3, you got the watchmen. You got the mighty men, the grinders, and the windows. And the general understanding of the interpretation of this is the watchmen would be your arms and your hands. The mighty men are your legs and your knees and your shoulders. And in that phrase here, it says, the watchman's house tremble and the mighty men stoop. So as you get older, do your hands begin to shake? Maybe you don't have it. You're not as steady as you used to be. As you get older, maybe you start to stoop. Your back hurts a little more. You're getting older. The grinders, they say you start to lose your teeth. Your teeth don't work as well as they used to. And the windows, as your vision begins to deteriorate. You're not seeing as well. I remember when I had to start wearing glasses. I hated it. I still do. It's a pain. It's a difficulty in life. You go on to verse 4. "And the doors on the street are shut as the sound of the grinding mill is low. And one will arise at the sound of the bird, and all the daughters of song will sing softly." So doors. Either your hearing is failing or you're no longer to speak as well as you used to. Again, the grinding, the chewing of the food, or maybe your ears can't pick up the sounds outdoors. Rising up. You don't sleep as well as you get older. Sleep is lost to you. You're not sleeping as deeply. And the music there at the end, your voice starts to quaver, your voice weakens, verse 5. "Furthermore, men are afraid of a high place and of terrors on the road. The almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags himself along, and the caperberry is ineffective. For man goes to his eternal home while mourners go about in the street. So there in verse 5, you're afraid and terrified of heights. What's the one thing when you get older you get scared of? Falling. It is detrimental. I mean, my kids, they run and fling themselves onto the floor now. And I see that, and all I do is just like the pain that shoots through me watching that. But for me, if I fall, I might get bruised. But if you're 60, 70 years old and you fall, that could end it. That could end it for you. The people become terrified. What about this phrase here? The almond tree blossoms. Who's ever seen a almond tree blossom? What does it look like? So you get the flowers coming out on an almond tree. Have you ever seen that? It's white. Pure white. What do you think that's in reference to here maybe? Is it gray hairs? The gray hairs. And I don't think we need much explanation about a grasshopper dragging itself across on the ground. You're barely getting out of bed. You barely have the energy to get things done. Now, the New American Standard on the next part has this talking about caperberries. You know, anybody know what a caperberries are? It's a food. It's a delightful food. Other translations, I think, are correct when they say it probably means desire. These are your desires. It is a loss of appetite. Your loss of appetite. Things don't taste the same or the way they used to. You're losing that desire. And you long for home as you come to the end of verse 5. For man goes to his eternal home while mourners go about in the street. You're going to die. Verse 6. Remember him. What was that harking back to? Verse 1, right? Remember him. Before the silver cord is broken and the golden bowl is crushed. The pitcher by the well is shattered and the wheel at the cistern is crushed. What is a cistern? Pew Packer. Oh, Caleb. What is a cistern? You forgot. Huh? Yeah, it holds water. And in this picture being given here, you got this a pitcher by the well is shattered, and the wheel at the cistern is crushed. The wheel at the cistern is crushed. That's where you let the bucket down. If you can't get the bucket down, there's no wheel. Let's say the bowl is shattered, and you can't get water out of that. How bad is that for you? You're dead. That represents life, right? The water represents your life. And the beginning here, the silver cord is broken, the golden bowl is crushed. I think that's talking about even the wealthy are not spared. Doesn't matter who you are, we are all going to meet the same fate. We're all going to die. He's hearkening to the youth. Remember him. You may be young. You may think you're going to live forever and that you can do whatever you want. And your days are full of joy, and they are. They are. There's a lot of opportunities in front of you, but that's the time when we generally neglect the things of God. And he's telling us, prepare now. Build up a strong foundation of faith, spiritual faith, now while the days are good. Verse 7, then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. That comes on the heels. Everything that was just said there in 3 through 6. It's talking about death. You're dying. And it's talking about this, you get this idea of a homestead, of a house, maybe a city. That's our lives. We're generally, our lives are hearkened to a tent dwelling in this, living in this home that we long to go home to the eternal. When you're going to get old, each and every one of you who are young right now, you're going to get old. One day, you will need glasses. Your hair will turn gray. Falling is not going to be so much fun anymore. The energy and the vigor will start to wane. I'll never forget another time when I was with my kids, my 2 boys, were riding our bikes around Dynamite Park down here, and someone had built this dirt ramp. It was about that high, but it went up pretty high. And I remember with my dirt bike, I used to go down South Mountain and I would fly on my bike. I said, oh, Josh, watch this. So I'd take my bike as fast as I could. I was about 10 feet in the air with my bike, and when I hit the ground, I thought I was going to die. That hurt every joint and bone in my body. And that's when I first realized, Chris, you're getting old. I couldn't believe it. I used to do that all the time. No big deal. But now it is. As you get older, the body wears out. What's going on in your life right now, a lot of good things, but what you ought to be doing, and you are, being here shows you are, is preparing. Because one day we will die and we will go to heaven. And then he ends out, verse 8, it's the same way the preacher started. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. All is vanity. What does vanity mean? Vain. Now, what is vain? What does that mean? Empty. Empty. All the joy, all the things of this world, everything we gain in this world is empty. It gives you nothing. Nothing. You didn't bring anything into it. You'll take nothing out of it. It can do nothing for you. Not that God doesn't want us to have joy, but you better be preparing for what's to come. He goes on in verse 9. In addition to being a wise man, the preacher also taught the people knowledge. And he pondered, searched out, and arranged many proverbs. Now you can tell here, verse 9, it's now back to third person. It's no longer Solomon speaking. This is why I think a prophet, some prophet, I don't know who, wrote Ecclesiastes, but he wrote the words of Solomon. And now as he brings the words of Solomon to an end in verse 8, he's coming back. And he's saying, here's what Solomon is saying. He's making some application for us. Have you ever heard the phrase that life is like school? See, I think I have it written down here. Life is like school, except that sometimes you don't know what the lessons are until you have failed the examination. Have you ever heard that before? Life is like school, only sometimes when you don't know what the lessons are until you have failed the examination. Do you feel like maybe that's what life is like, where you're just going along with life, you think you know what's going on, next thing you know, boom, life hits you square in the eyes. You didn't even see it coming. You had no idea. So unprepared. How unprepared are people today about life? Would you say people in general are prepared for life, or they're not prepared for life? Not prepared. What does that mean? It means you don't know what's coming. You have no idea what to prepare for. You don't know what's going on. You're unprepared. So that statement would be true. Life is like school, except that you have no idea what's going to be on the test. You're unprepared. If you're going to have a test, pew packers, what do you need to do? Study. We're going to begin to that verse here in just a moment, what that's about. Study. You have to prepare. How many people prepare for what's after this life? They're not doing it. They're unprepared. And when they start to get older, they begin to see their life is about ready to come to an end. A lot of people do what? They start looking. Then they start to look. But they're so unprepared. But they're beginning to look for the answers of what's after this life. He goes on. So actually, let me go back up a little bit to verse 9 there. So, in addition to being a wise man, that's Solomon, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, and he pondered, searched out, and arranged many proverbs. Right? So it's clearly Solomon. He's talking about him. He wanted his sons, he wanted his people to be ready, to get ready. And remember, how does Proverbs, who's he writing to? His sons. He wants them to prepare their lives, to have a firm foundation. Verse 10, the preacher sought to find delightful words and to write words of truth correctly. Delightful words. He's not saying that he's trying to tickle their ears. He's saying is that he's trying to find words that is going to capture their attention to get them to think. That's why he ends that with, he writes words of truth correctly. He's presenting it in a way that's delightful to people so that they will listen to what he says. And when you read through Proverbs, would you say that that's written in a delightful way, a pithy way, short, concise phrases that captures your attention, makes you think? That's what Solomon did. He's very wise, and he could do that. Verse 11. The words of wise men are like goads, and masters of these collections are like well-driven nails. They are given by one shepherd. Okay, what is a goad? Have you ever goaded somebody? You know what that means? What does that mean? Huh? Okay, tricking. We generally use that in a negative sense nowadays. Like we will tell our our kids, don't goad your sister. Don't antagonize them, is what I usually say. A goad is like a sharp, pointy stick. You poke the back of a cow in order to make it move forward, or the sheep to make them move forward. You're goading them into a particular direction. Here, he's using it in a positive sense. The words of wise men are like goads. It's driving us toward a particular direction. And in this case, he's talking about is a collection of well-driven nails. Well-driven nails. Have you ever said after a test, I nailed it? Have you ever said, what does that mean? Have you ever wondered, what does that mean? I nailed it? Nailed what? What is that? The test. But why say nailed it? What's the correlation there? What's that? Okay, yes, I get that. You did good on it, but why use that phrase, you nailed it? Why is that? How many people has ever... Yeah, you get it right. Look for that stud in the wall, and you miss. And you got like this line of holes, so you hit the stud. Have you ever done that? Or you end up with a big hole. That happened to me once. But every once in a while, you put a nail in the wall, and it's exactly where you want. Not only did you get the stud, but when you picture the picture up, it's exactly where you wanted it. That's it. So think of the nail here. You place a nail where you're goading them to go a particular direction, and it's a place for them to hold on to. It's exactly where you wanted them to be. And so you got that nail right in the right spot. And then you put another nail as you're getting them to climb up toward truth. You're moving them in the right directions. So the words of wise men are like that. They're pushing you in a particular direction. There's a plan. It's not just some random lesson or random series of lessons. Often I've told you and tried to point out over the years where I have a goal in mind over the years and over the quarters where I'm trying to bring us to a particular place. And I'll mention other lessons in certain lessons where I'm trying to get our minds focused to where we're headed, why it's here. I want us to find that in the book of Genesis and Exodus. Remember when we did that? We went to Genesis and Exodus, and we jumped over to Daniel, and we were looking at those connections, those well-placed nails that were written in all those books. Wise men put these down. And where did they get these? They were all given by one shepherd. Who's that? God. That's God. And then verse 12. But beyond this, my son, be warned. The writing of many books is endless, and excessive devotion to books is wearying to the body. Is that right, pew packers? Yes. What is it that you're reading right now, Blake? The Aeneid. As we were talking about that earlier, one of the books I despise the most, and I still do today, is Canterbury Tales. Worst written book ever. Can't stand it. Still can't stand it. I don't want my kids to have to go through that, but I already see it on their reading list. Ugh. Do not like that book. It's boring, tedious. Okay, but what is our writer here? What does he mean? The writing of many books is endless, and excessive devotion to books is wearying to the body. Keep it in context. Let's see if you can see it. Why does he place that right here, right now? Right after the wise men are like goads, master collections are like well-driven nails. They're bringing you to a particular direction. They're bringing you toward truth. And then many books the writing of many books is endless. Excessive devotion to books is wearying to the body. Why? What do you think?
Maybe it's taking you away from other things.
Taking you away. Or, yeah, it is. It's taking you away from truth, taking you away from other things. Like we were saying earlier, when you get older and you start getting close, you begin to realize you're going to die, and you have not established that firm foundation of spiritual foundation. What do people generally do? They're looking all of a sudden. Oh man, I need to live forever, or I need to find out what I need to do. What would I do? What's after this? And they're searching for truth when they should have been looking a long time ago. And so you go to Barnes and Noble, and where do people go when they're looking for truth? What section do they look under? Self-help books. And there's nothing. Is there anything wrong with self-help books? There's not. But if you go there and you open it and go to that section, how many books are there? Lots. Psychology and sociology and self-help, and there's so many, and you can go and read and find differing ideas and thoughts all over the place. One of the things I do a lot, I read commentaries, and I'll mention several times where a lot of commentators are all over the place on different ideas, and you can weary yourself, right, Theo? You can weary yourself on all the different books you could read on one particular topic, and they're just everywhere. You can get to a point where you have no idea. The more you read, the less you know. So where do you find truth? It's in God's Word. And one of the things I always encourage you to do is when you're reading, when you're studying, read it as if you're reading it for the very first time. Forget everything you know. Don't assume you know anything, and read it for what it says. Keep it in context, because words have definition in context only. Only. Vanity of vanities, all is vanities. Talking with Garrett and with Travis has encouraged me to go back and look at some of the books I've read in the past. And so I picked up Mere Christianity again. It's been, like 10 or 15 years since I read that. And it's still shocking to me. He wrote that book back in the 40s. He did a radio program for the BBC, and then he wrote his radio program down in the book. And he opens up with talking about the word gentleman. How loosely do we use the phrase gentleman? Who's a gentleman? Who's a gentleman? Guys, right? Men. You go somewhere, ladies and gentlemen. Who are you referring to? All the men, all the women. What is a gentleman? It's just a man, right? What did it used to mean? Do you know? Okay, good. No, that's not what it was. It was a landowner, someone who owned land. That was a gentleman. If you call the person a gentleman, they're well off and they had land. Now when you call someone a gentleman, what does it mean? Nothing. Doesn't mean anything, because anyone can be a gentleman. What's a Christian? If you were to go out and say Christian to somebody, what do they think? Pretty watered down. It can mean anything. It can mean anything. We've diluted the word. So that's why you'll hear me a lot of times say, I'm looking for truth seekers. Because in our world, we've changed definitions. I mean, not necessarily changed it, we've diluted them. And it's gotten to a point now where, what is truth? Well, that doesn't even have a definition anymore. Nothing does. There's no standards. In our high school class, we're talking about evolution and creation and apologetics. How to defend the truth. But do it in such a way that you, as we're goading people, right? We're trying to place those well-placed nails to get them to think and reason properly to bring them to the truth. And that's difficult to do in this day and age because definitions are so fluid now. They're all over the place. And one of the things that I think we're going to be talking about this, maybe not this Sunday, but the following Sunday, is talking about nature. What is human nature? We've heard it, but do you know what that means? Do you know what it used to mean? It was one of those things where if you said human nature, people understood it. These are things that are natural to us. We don't kill people. You don't have to teach that to anybody. We naturally know it's wrong, right? We know it's wrong. You don't lie. That's our human nature. How well do we hold to that standard? Not too well. But we know it's true. We know there's a standard. Even those who don't believe in standards recognize there is a standard, because as soon as you start defending yourself into anything, in any way, you're creating a standard. You're saying there's a standard out there. Now, there's human nature, but there's also other laws out there that cannot be broken, like the law of gravity, right? Can you break the law of gravity? Can anybody ever break the law of gravity? No, you can't do that. Is there a nature to apes? Do they have a particular nature? You'll see where I'm going out. Yeah, there is, and they don't break that nature. Not at all, not one bit. Do we see a particular nature in tigers? Yeah, tigers act a certain way. Same with rabbits, same with every animal out there. They don't break who they are. There's only one creation that can. That's you and me. Because if you scare any animal, what's its first reaction? Run away. Run away. And if you corner it, it's going to fight to the death. When you see something scary, you run. Every animal has that instinct inside of them. They run away. I was watching videos looking at tigers. I was looking at lions. Even when their cubs are in danger, their first reaction, they run away. They run away from the danger. They run. That's their nature. But when we see children, we have two things pop up in our minds. Run, if we're scared, but then there's another one. We should help. And unlike an animal, we have a choice, don't we? We can choose to defy that instinct and do something that's against nature. But we would consider human nature to look out for number one. But now we're acting more like animals because we only look after ourselves. We're looking more and more like animals. We're no longer doing what God planned for us. If we only had a manual, some sort of instruction book that we could open up and it would show us our purpose. The conclusion, verse 13, when all has been heard, is fear God and keep his commandments, because this applies to every person. This applies to every person. That phrase there, when he says that, literally can be, for this is the very purpose of man. That's what he's saying. This is the very purpose of man. Fear God, keep his commandments. For God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. You're going to die, and you will stand in front of God, and you will be judged. What and who are you going to be? We have to make a choice. And that's the whole point of Ecclesiastes. In your life, there's a lot out there in this world. There's a lot of joy. There's a lot of things that can distract you. There's a lot of things that grab your attention. What kind of foundation have you set to prepare yourself for what you're going to face in this world? When all has been said, only one thing's important. The very purpose for why you've been created. Obey God. Keep his commandments. A little over, but I want us to think about that. Maybe go back, read through the book of Ecclesiastes, and think about these things as you read through them to see if they're so. Chew on it for a while and see what you think.